All right, James, welcome to Inside Athletic Training. We're thrilled to have you on for our 22nd episode. We like to start each show by asking our listeners about the Professional Baseball Athletic Trainer Society, also known as PBATS, and really ask them to share what the society has meant to you and your career thus far.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me on this morning, Sam. PBATS is really kind of an amazing thing. You always hear the stories about the history and how it got started and the small group of guys that did it. So it's always fascinating to hear that stuff during winter meetings and, other times you could grab guys. But I think some of the biggest things to me is, just the legislation that they work through on that end of things. But also really the thing that's my favorite thing is the work they do in the community, especially with the kids in the community. I know we have camps kind of all across the country with all the major league clubs through the summer. And I think that for me is really what matters, working with the community, working with the kids and the youth to really put our foot out there and kind of impress that area.
Yeah, and some of the stuff, you guys with the White Sox and all the teams across the league have done in the community with the play campaign, the Ability Transcends Challenges program, and all that stuff is just great to kind of give kids the opportunity to get involved and remain healthy and see the ballpark and all really cool stuff. Well, James, you're currently in your third season as a head athletic trainer with the White Sox, 15th year in total with the organization. And we'll get into your job and career path in a bit. But first, I want to get more into your background and share with the listeners kind of what paths led you to your super successful career today. So let's take it back to the beginning. Tell us where you're from, what you did growing up in terms of sports, and also where you found your passion for athletic training.
Okay, yeah, that's great. So I'm from a small town in New York, Cutchogue, New York. It's way out on the east end of Long Island. I grew up playing all kinds of sports. Predominantly it was football, also played basketball, ran track and field, played Little League Baseball like everyone else. But for the most part, it was really a lot of football for me growing up. Continued that into college, and that's kind of where I found my passion for athletic training. There comes a point in time for all of us where the reality sets in that, hey, you're not going to be playing football or baseball. It's your life. And you kind of need to figure out what you're going to do. And I think the athletic trainer that we had when I was in college, just seeing how he was able to help athletes and, help people in general was really what started that for me.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear everybody's stories about how they got started in athletic training. A lot of us, not myself included, but a lot of you guys in PBATS, had an injury or just realized the end was near and you wanted to stay in the game somehow. So it's really cool to see the different paths that led you all to where you are today. We mentioned a bit earlier that you've been with the White Sox for 15 years, which is absolutely amazing. A great career so far. And you've definitely had many different and important roles in the game of baseball and athletic training. I'd like to hear from you about what it's like getting into Major League Baseball athletic training, but also the path you took through the minor leagues to get to the big leagues. You made stops in Great Falls, Kannapolis, Birmingham, and more. So share with the listeners a bit about that journey that you took to get where you are today.
Sure. So actually, it kind of started with a bit of luck on my part, just because when I was in grad school at Texas Tech, I was looking for an internship kind of in the summer between classes just for a couple of months. And I was sending my resume all over the place. And at the time, had no idea how baseball worked with the minor leagues and everything else. And I actually sent my resume to the Clearwater Threshers, which was a baseball team, which I knew, but had no idea they were affiliated to the Philadelphia Phillies at the time or any of how that worked. And they got back to me and the guy's signature had Philadelphia Phillies. And I kind of scratched my head and I was like, I didn't send them anything. But it was from the Clearwater team. And they told me, hey, you could come out, we can't pay you anything, but we'd be more than happy to help you get some experience and do that. So I did take that opportunity. I did that for about a month and a half, 2 months between classes and absolutely loved it. I mean, that was actually my introduction to athletic training in baseball and, loved it. They asked me to come back for a, full season internship the following year. And I did. And then after that, got the full-time job with the White Sox. I went to Great Falls, Montana, which is one of their rookie ball affiliates. And I ended up spending the next 5 summers there. This would not be an ideal situation for anyone by any means, or
Sure.
expect to be there. But we'll talk, some I think about, some of the longevity and some of the stability that we've had here with the White Sox, and that was kind of ended up being part of the process. So I went there for 5 summers, had, extended spring training those years as well, and then ended up going to Kannapolis, which was our low A ball team. And I was there for 2 years, and then things picked up quite a bit. Went to Birmingham after that for another 2 years, and then Charlotte for just 1 year before being called up to Chicago. So it was, I spent 10 years in the minor leagues. I wouldn't trade a second of it, even those 5 years in rookie ball. I think all of it was super valuable, getting me to where I am today.
Yeah, and we hear a lot about kind of cutting your teeth in the minor leagues and the lessons and kind of the ability to make mistakes and to learn on the fly at those lower levels. When we talk about those stops in the minor leagues, I'm really interested to hear your perspective on the importance of that time, like you mentioned, 5 years in rookie ball, which is more than I think most do now. Internships and just everything you've done, and love to hear your take on how important paying your dues in the minor leagues is, while also still staying motivated to get to where you are today, as so many athletic trainers aspire to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I really think it's just an invaluable process. Just to be completely honest, I know a lot of people look at it as, paying dues and putting in time and this and that, but I think it's really so much more than that. I think the experience that you gain, the lessons that you learn, like you said, you have opportunity to fail. Not that any of us are trying to fail, but I think the biggest motivation for me when I was in the minor leagues, and continues to be part of me here, injury safely. What's the number of days? Can I do it faster than anyone else has done it? And that was really the motivation. And almost, I don't want to say it became a game, but a little bit in my mind, it was the game of, okay, last time I had this injury with another guy, it took me 13 days to get this back. Can I do it in 10? Can I do it in 8? What's realistic to bring a guy back safely, but as fast as possible? And I think that was the big driving factor for me from a motivation standpoint, because there's things that you do need to do to keep yourself motivated in a sense, and it's your job in a sense, but at the same time to keep that edge, to see what you could kind of bring to the group. And you're talking to guys at other affiliates during the season, and when you see everyone in spring training, there's just more things. Hey, I tried this, it didn't work, or I tried this and it worked really well. And I think those are just some important things that helped me in the minor leagues.
Yeah, now obviously your road to the minor leagues led you to the job as head athletic trainer with the White Sox. I want to talk a bit about the White Sox athletic training staff, both present and past. We'll get into your staff currently more later. But I want to start with those who came before you and mentored you along the way. One guy who is just an iconic figure in Chicago and with the White Sox is Herm Schneider. He was the head athletic trainer for many years with the White Sox, through World Series championships and legends like Frank Thomas and people like that in Chicago. I know you spent some time with Herm and you were around him at the tail end of his career. Can you talk a bit about what it was like being around him and just working with such a legendary figure in the city and in the profession?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest thing with Herm, especially, I kind of caught the tail end of it. They actually brought me up to Chicago a couple Septembers when I was in the minor leagues. One of the years when I was in Birmingham, and then again when I was in Charlotte. And I think the biggest thing that I learned from Herm was having a plan, and having a clear message. And that clear message was not only to the player and to the staff, but also the front office, and not to kind of give a cloudy message or maybe any false hope, or just have a clear message so that everyone understood what was going on. And, he had a little saying on his desk, it is what it is. And, that's how he kind of approached things where, if it's an ankle sprain, it's an ankle sprain. If the guy's got a labrum tear, he's got a labrum tear. That's great. But what are we doing about it? And be clear and concise about that, and have direction with that. So, that was really a great lesson to learn just on the communication front, and also really having the opportunity to see him do that for so long, knowing that he did it for so long, and all the success that he had while he was the head athletic trainer here. It's always nice to kind of talk to him a little bit. He was actually here yesterday. I talked to him for a bit before the game, so it's always nice to kind of have that person to bounce some things off, some ideas, and get their thoughts and perspective for what they saw and what they can kind of help with.
And I know, you mentioned you were kind of saw the tail end of Herm's career when you were breaking into the game and got up to the big leagues for a couple playoff runs there. Since then, you've worked with some awesome athletic trainers throughout your career at the beginning and currently as well. But when you were first getting your start, outside of Herm and some of the older guys with the White Sox, who were some of the role models you looked up to in the game of baseball and athletic training?
Yeah, I think really the first one was when I took that internship with the Phillies. Brian Camerata was their minor league medical coordinator. And that was, really the first, I would say, role model in athletic training for me. He was, not only extremely talented and good at his job, but also very much had that, life balance, life work balance, where, he was very much a family guy as well. And that was, nice to see, because you don't always see that sometimes. This job takes a lot of time, and to see that balance from me being an intern from the early goings of my career was nice. And it kind of set me up to kind of keep that in mind and remember that for when I was having a family and whatnot. So I think Brian was amazing when I started my career over with Philadelphia, and then going back. After that, I worked baseball at Texas Tech, and Sean Lindsay was the head trainer there for the baseball team. And he was just phenomenal. Again, another great role model in athletic training. And really, I would say those two guys for the start. And then after then, I shot into the White Sox, and we've had so many people here help me along the way.
Yeah, now that you've been working as an athletic trainer in baseball for more than a decade, like we said, 15 years with the White Sox, wondering if roles were reversed and you were, back in college, knowing what you know now, is there certain advice or a best piece of advice that you'd give to a college student looking to get into athletic training and professional baseball?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is, taking opportunities, getting a little bit uncomfortable, maybe taking something that you've never done before. Like I said, I had a ton of experience playing football and then working football in college, in grad school, and never had worked baseball at all, and kind of took a flyer on it at the time. And it was really something that I ended up loving and being passionate about. And I think that's something super important that I would recommend to anyone is, even if it's something you're unsure about, you're going to learn something about it. You may not end up loving it, but you're definitely going to have a great learning experience from doing that.
And to add on to that, you guys are always looking for talent in the athletic training world to fill affiliate spots or internships or, to help out at the facility. When you're hiring, interns or lower level positions for the White Sox, is there a personality trait, an educational accomplishment, or a certain skill set that you guys look for in particular as you move through an interview process?
Yeah, I think, you're always looking for all the basics, the general education and, regular traits, punctuality, that kind of stuff. But I think the biggest one for me is you're really looking for someone that has the confidence to just jump right into things and get their hands dirty a little bit. And again, with that comes the importance of knowing that, hey, sometimes mistakes are going to be made, and that's okay as long as you're learning from those mistakes. So I think that's the one thing, kind of an intangible that you're looking for, is someone just with that confidence to jump in and get in the mix and not kind of sit back on the sidelines.
Yeah, and to add on to that, a lot of your colleagues, people like Ryan DePanflo, even Brett Walker, who we had on, who's on your staff in Chicago, mentioned that the ability to kind of jump into things, fail, learn from it, and keep plugging away is super important. I'm wondering, when when there's different styles and people in the training room who are doing things different way, wondering if you could add on to just how you train, and make sure the younger people who you are working with are kind of learning and not making those mistakes a second time.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we've been very good over the last few years, kind of setting up systems through the organization, which really help guide this. By no means do we want to cookie cut in a sense and have everyone as a robot doing, steps 1 through 10. But we do have some guidelines and stuff that, we have shoulder programs and different sprint programs and core routines and stuff like that, that at least has some guardrails of, hey, this is what we want in general, but also allows people to be themselves, and tailor them to what their preferences are and what their strengths are as well.
Yeah. And then to piggyback off that, the last question about this topic, I know there's so much information out there today. There's so many courses, noses in the textbooks, as people would say, YouTube, just so much information for college students and younger athletic trainers to review. So how do you guys balance the learning and the knowledge that you get educationally versus the actual practicing of being an athletic trainer and getting that hands-on experience?
Yeah, I think that's the most important thing that you're looking for. You always want to have, even going back to what, we talked about with Herm, of having that plan, having that plan for the player and the staff and everyone. And, you don't want to lose sight of what that end goal is. There's a few different ways to get to that end goal, but at the end of the day, that's where you want to go. And you don't want to muddy the waters too much. If you're constantly adding different things, sometimes you'll take an educational course and it may work for one guy and it's worth it taking that course just for that one guy. But in the same breath, if you know that, hey, if we do this, this, and this, it's going to get us to that end goal, stay the course with that. There's still a place for every piece of education, every piece of knowledge, in everything. But yeah, at the end of the day, you just don't want to lose sight of that end goal.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And moving on a bit, I'd like to get into your day-to-day as a head athletic trainer for the White Sox a bit. So to start, I'd like to talk about the staff you guys have there. As most of our listeners know, athletic training and performance staffs are growing incredibly quickly. You're one of the guys who's been around for a while. You've seen it all. The White Sox, with Herm and a couple of his colleagues back in the day were just a couple guys, maybe even just two, doing everything. Can you talk about the growth of the profession, and even more specifically, how staffs have changed and grown over time to really suit the needs of the player, but also the medical staffs and the professionals like you?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've even changed significantly in the minor leagues, so it's not just a major league thing, but in the minors, it was myself and a strength coach, and that was kind of it for the 10 years that I was in the minors. And now what's nice is we also hire an assistant athletic trainer at every affiliate. So there's a minimum of 2. On top of that, at times we'll have interns, or sometimes there's help while they're at home, not at the road. But there's a minimum of 2 athletic trainers, and we're also kind of expanding our strength side as well, adding kind of sports science people, whether it's interns or seasonal positions as well, to that side. So they're getting help in the weight room, but also with some more of the tech stuff as well. So, I mean, we've almost doubled the staff as far as that goes in the minor league, which is immensely helpful. As far as the big leagues, I remember when I was in the minor leagues for years, it was just two guys in the big leagues, two medical and one strength. And now, just thinking about our morning meetings, it's myself. We have two other athletic trainers, physical therapy, massage therapists, two strength coaches, two sports science guys. We also have a nutritionist. So, I mean, it's growing, and these are all good things at the end of the day. I think sometimes people get concerned with change and, what's going on, and are there too many people? But I think as long, again, as you have a plan and direction with what you're doing, adding all these positions only helps at the end of the day.
And as the staff grows, and you have more support as the head athletic trainer from those working under you and with you, have you found that you're doing less hands-on work in the training room than you did when you're an assistant? And is that something you wish you could do more of versus the administrative, front office communication work that you do as a head athletic trainer?
Yeah, so this question actually comes up quite a bit when people ask me about this, and I have the same answer, and I hope I'll always have the same answer. But I think at the end of the day, you make the job what you want it to be.
Sure.
And that, for me, watching, when I was in the minor leagues and watching other organizations and even other positions, one of my goals was not to do that. Now, it does take me out of the training room to some extent, depending on conversations with the front office or coaches and whatnot like that. But I really made it a priority for me to stay in the training room as much as I can, just to keep a pulse on things. I think when you take yourself out of the training room, you lose a little bit of, I don't know if it's respect or, you lose that pulse. I don't know that you have the same amount of respect maybe from the players sometimes, because they kind of look at you and they're like, well, how would you know? You were in the front office all day or, wherever. So I think that's really become a priority for me is to stay in the training room as much as I can, even though it does pull me out at times.
And I think we've heard that answer from the majority of your colleagues in the game who are head athletic trainers. Their roots are in the training room and working with players, and it's great to hear that a lot of you are still able to do that while balancing your really your huge responsibilities upstairs. Getting more into the weeds on that topic of being in the training room. I'd like to hear from you a bit about what you call a so-called normal day looks like for the head athletic trainer of the White Sox. I know a lot of our listeners might think, James shows up for treatment before the game, watches the game from the dugout, does some post-game recovery stuff, and kind of heads home. But we know there's much more to it than that. Can you walk us through what a normal game day looks like for someone in your position?
Absolutely. Yeah. I don't think maybe just some of the listeners, but I think a lot of families still thinks that I just show up at 7 o'clock once the game's over.
Yeah.
So, yeah, typically I'll have scheduled, we'll say for a 7 p.m. game, a 1 o'clock meeting for our staff. Typically I'll get to the ballpark a little bit before that just to kind of prepare. And if there's anything I need to do, maybe in the front office beforehand that I know about, I'll do that. But typically we'll start the day with a 1 o'clock meeting, and it'll have all the people I talked about before, strength coaches, the medical staff, sports science, nutrition, everyone will be in there for that. And we'll kind of basically map out the day. If anything happened overnight or the morning of, we'll catch everyone up on that, and then just kind of plan out the day and what we need to do to put our foot in the best place to have a successful day. After that, I'll kind of shoot down to the coach's room and have essentially take what we had in that meeting and transfer it over and see if there's anything on their end. We may need a rehab that needs ground balls or BP or something like that. So we just need to make sure that that's all set up. and ready to go. And then we kind of jump right into treatment time for the next couple hours. And at that time, like I said before, I may be pulled over to the front office, or, the GM may come in to my office and just pull me out of the training room for a couple minutes and talk about that stuff. And, we obviously have all our rehab work during that time as well. And then guys will go out for stretch. And typically I'll like to be outside for stretch when they play catch, when they're hitting BP. And it's not only a safety thing, but a lot of times when we have rehab guys or maybe guys that are just a little bit banged up, and just keep a closer eye on them, and, check in with the bullpen guys to see how they're doing while they're playing catch and during that time. And then you come back inside, we have some pregame activation stuff, the starting pitchers getting ready for the game, and then we go outside for the game. And the game's a really important thing. We're there for the safety of the players, obviously, and we're watching that, but we'll also, it gives me time to sit down on the bench and talk with Brett and talk with Josh, talk with Goldie, our strength coach, and EB as well, about things that happened during the day. Hey, there are things that worked that didn't work. So it's kind of a continuation of, what we did to start the day during the game a little bit as well. And then, like you said earlier, we have some post-game stuff going on, some recovery, sometimes treatments, hopefully not an injury, but if there is, we have that stuff going on. We have docs taking a look, x-rays, any of that stuff going on post-game, as well as treatments. And then we get out of there around midnight or so and plan to do the same thing again tomorrow.
Yeah. And obviously there's so much going on in your day-to-day, an extremely fulfilling job, and working as part of a team is always great. Speaking of fulfillment, we ask a lot of our guests, what's the most fulfilling part of being either a head or assistant athletic trainer in the big leagues. And a lot of them mention how important and fulfilling it is to get an injured player back on the field through your work and have them succeed and get healthy again. Is that something that you would say is most fulfilling in your job, or is there something else as well?
Yeah, I think there's really two things for me. I think that's, number one is getting guys back and playing and being successful. And I think the other thing sometimes is, helping guys navigate tough decisions, because sometimes it's not always a happy ending right away. Sometimes guys need a procedure or a surgery even that takes a lot longer, and it's a longer rehab process. And I think sometimes it's tough to navigate those things. There's a lot of pressures that the players have to deal with in making these decisions. And I think sometimes helping them navigate that, sometimes you have to take a step back. Sometimes it's not all about baseball. Sometimes it's about life as well. And I think having the opportunity to make an impact, a positive impact for that player to make the right decision for their life, for their current situation and their future down the road is super important.
Yeah, that's super interesting. We talked to actually Todd Tomzik, director of sports medicine with the Pirates a couple of weeks ago, about the mental health and kind of his role in the clubhouse and the training room, of almost not being a therapist, but being someone to talk to in a safe place like the training room. Do you find that is an aspect of your role that has grown over time, just kind of your communication skills and helping people out with those decisions and their mental well-being as well?
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely is, because, like I said, these are tough decisions. There's, not only pressures from their teammates, and, you even think about the fans and how social media is now, and, their own families and stuff like that. So I think, them having a safe place and a sorts to kind of vent a little bit, and also kind of bounce ideas and thoughts and get their ideas out there, and to make those right decisions, I think it's super important.
Mm-hmm. And with all that work you're doing, you obviously have some extremely talented athletic trainers on staff with you. I'd like to hear more from you as the leader of the staff, about the role you play in the development of, guys like Brett Walker and Josh and everyone on the staff there, and how you go about making sure everyone is continuing to learn, like we talked about, and grow and kind of get to the point they want to be in their career.
No, yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest thing is just, doing the best to know your staff inside and out. It's an evaluation process, but it's also getting to know them. You're communicating with them constantly, but you also need to take a step back, from the task at hand, and also understand that, hey, these guys have career goals as well, and what is that, and how do we get them to that point, is really what it comes down to.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And one thing I was super excited to talk to you about today is your staff and the continuity that you guys have, and you've shown over decades and decades of work there in the training room. You guys, Brett and yourself and Herm previously have been together for so long. It seems like there isn't much turnover in the athletic training department, sports medicine department over with the White Sox. Can you talk about what you credit for keeping your staff together and growing as a group, and just, that continuity that I mentioned?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think the biggest thing at the end of the day, with anything, everyone has a job to do. And, at the end of the day, this is a job. And I think what's important in keeping that stability is understanding that and knowing that, hey, there's other things that are important, beyond the job. And I think recognizing that stuff, and having the ability to put, families first, in a sense, so that when there's a situation, people are able to do that, and people are able to take care of their families in such a way, I think has really been the White Sox way, in a sense. And I think they've always kind of told us that, and given us the opportunity to have that time to take care of our families, whether it's, being here, or having to go home, or whatever the situation may be. The White Sox have always been very kind and generous in that sense. And I really think because of that, it's created a lot of stability and longevity with a lot of our careers here with the White Sox.
And within that career, one additional question that we get a lot from listeners, and I'm also curious about myself, is the actual team play and success on the field. I know you've been a part of winning clubs and rebuilding clubs as well. I'm interested to hear, does that impact the attitude of the athletic training staff, the work you guys do, whether you're contending or whether you're kind of in a rebuilding phase?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing is to maintain focus. I mean, we've had these conversations, obviously everything's a little bit easier when you're winning, right? Everyone likes to win, everyone's having a good time winning. And sometimes it's difficult, especially when, even in a winning season, when you're in a little bit of a losing rut, it can become difficult. And I think the biggest thing is maintaining focus. And, we'll talk about in our meetings at times of, hey, we're in a little tight spot. Guys are maybe going to complain a little bit more, or there's going to be some, different questions that are asked to us, or just in general to the players. And, at the end of the day, we need to stay the course. We're here, to do the job. We're here to keep the guys on the field. We're here to keep the guys healthy. We're here to rehab the guys when they're not healthy. And that's our job. And the biggest thing that we can do is just stay positive, do what we can to keep these guys going, and get back on track. So yeah, it's definitely something that gets brought up, and you do have to mention once in a while, because it becomes tough on the players and the coaches when losing starts to happen, and you just need that consistency and that positive attitude to move forward.
Yeah, just like any job, whether it's something I'm doing or you're doing or anyone in any position, consistency and that persistence to just stay motivated is super important. Another thing that is probably most important to you is the staff you're surrounded with every single day in Chicago with the White Sox. Brett, Josh, so many more people that you work with every day, obviously important to the work you do. So I want to give you some time here now to recognize those assistant athletic trainers and other people within your organization. So feel free to, as you see fit, to talk about the people you get to work with every day.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Brett and Josh have been phenomenal. Brett, funny little story there. We met when I was in rookie ball all those years up in Great Falls, Montana. He was actually working in a clinic up there, and our team physician asked me, hey, I got this PT and he would love to just stop by and kind of shadow and, do some of this. And I kind of pushed it off a little bit, to be honest, because I was like, why does this guy want to do this? So finally I kind of folded and said, sure, come on. And he showed up every single home game that we were in Great Falls, Montana. And it just, it blew my mind at first, but I was like, wow, okay, this is, definitely something. And, at the time, or actually a couple of years later, we were looking for a full-time physical therapist position. And, sometimes it's hard, like who's the fit, who's this, and I was like, well, we got the perfect guy. He's been working, essentially for free the last couple of years with our rookie ball affiliate, and he was hired at that time, and has been up here, and just great guy, hard worker. Don't have enough good things to say about that whole situation, and how he started in baseball and worked his way up as well. Josh, I mean, he's bearing down now on 30 years with the White Sox, which is just an amazing career. This is another, credit to the White Sox and Josh. You want to talk about family. He actually, when he originally took the job, his I think the first couple years in, we moved the team to Winston-Salem, and he ended up settling there with his family. And he passed up a lot of opportunities to get promoted in the organization. He actually got promoted for a short time, and then went back to be with his family in Winston. And now he's up here, and it's just again, another guy that's, true loyalty to the organization, amazing worker, probably one of the only guys that beats me to the ballpark a lot of times. And he's just always doing something to kind of make things easier for everyone else at the ballpark. So just truly an amazing guy to have as, on our team here as well. In the minor leagues, some of the guys that have been around, I say forever, and I'm not joking, but Scott Takao, who's our minor league medical coordinator, and Scott Johnson as well, who, he's been through the minor leagues every level. He actually just retired at the end of this past month. But was with the White Sox for 35 years. Another testament to some longevity and stability, and just the experience those two guys and were able to share over the years of, we laugh and joke, like earlier in this interview, talked about how, it was just an athletic trainer and a strength coach, and that was kind of your staff as far as that goes. Scott Johnson and Scotty Takal, they'll talk about, how they were kind of the clubhouse guy. They not only were they the athletic trainer and the strength coach, but they were also doing laundry when they're at affiliates and stuff like that. So it's just, to me, it's always amazing and really cool to kind of hear those stories and see where the profession has gone. And, to keep your mind open to saying, okay, this is so much better than it was back then, and let's continue to ride that train and make it better and better as we can go.
Yeah. And with regard to your story about Brett Walker, we had Brett on the show just a couple weeks ago, and he actually shared the same story about volunteering and finding a way in the door and getting involved. So it's really awesome to see just how his persistence and also your willingness to help him has created this amazing bond and actually led you both to work in the big leagues together, which is super cool to see. Well, James, I appreciate all the information and your time today. It's been great talking with you. To wrap up today's episode, we're going to finish with a quick Q&A segment that we call Extra Bases. So I'm going to ask you 4 quick questions to share some insight from you into your favorite things about athletic training in baseball. So we'll kick it off at first base. What is your favorite athletic training room outside of your home ballpark to work in the big leagues?
Okay. I think, New York Yankees is a really nice place to be at. I mean, some of these new stadiums, Atlanta is amazing. Texas also, the new stadium down there. But I mean, really, we're fortunate up here. There's a lot of really nice athletic training rooms here to work out of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of your colleagues. I think the overwhelming favorite has been Atlanta so far, so it's not surprising to hear you say that. Moving on to second base, you're in such a great city in Chicago, awesome stadium there. But what's your favorite MLB stadium outside of your own to watch a game from the dugout?
I think I'm going to stay in the same city and just go to the north side.
There you go.
We've had just those rival games, and we've had some really exciting games up there, and it's been fun to be a part of.
Yeah, you can't beat just being in the neighborhood on the north side, even though the rivalry can get quite intense, as many of us know. Moving on to third base, this is a tough to beat your home city here. As a former resident myself, I think Chicago is one of the best places on the planet. But what's your favorite city to visit on the road?
I think, going home in a sense a little bit to New York is always a nice trip. Seeing some family there, and also my current home. We live outside Atlanta during the off season. So being able to go down there is going to be really nice as well, especially with it being right after the All-Star break this year.
Mm-hmm. And moving on to home plate, the last question for today. We've had some really cool answers from some of your fellow athletic trainers across the league. Did you have a welcome to the big leagues moment at some point during your first year as a Major League Baseball athletic trainer?
Yeah, I think it was really early on. I think it was when we got on the bus headed to the airport out of spring training that first year. And I had nothing to do with the travel. No one asked me what time the bus was leaving or where we were going or who had to carry what equipment. So I think that was really the eye opener of, wow, I can just kind of be the medical guy now, and
Yeah.
I'm not too worried about travel or any of these other things that are going on that someone else is taking care of.
Yeah, definitely experience more resources in the big leagues. That can't be more true. Well, James, thanks so much for joining the show. We really appreciate your time, your dedication to PBATs and the profession of athletic training. And we wish you and your staff nothing but the best of luck throughout the rest of the season.
Thanks, Sam. Really appreciate it.
All right, James, we are good to go. Again, thanks so much for taking the time today. I'll get this edited and uploaded and send it over to you tomorrow when it goes live. But again, thanks so much for your time. And if there's anything we can do for you guys throughout the season, just feel free to let us know. And we look forward to seeing you for the play campaign in August.
Awesome. Appreciate that, Sam. Talk to you later.
All righty, have a good day.
All right, bye.
Bye.